Morning and happy 2021 to everyone. I'm Megan Fenton. Welcome to today's presentation on Westchester County Resources and Archives with Jackie Graziano, Archivist and Reading Room Manager at Westchester County Archives, and Patrick Raftery, Librarian at the Westchester County Historical Society. In just a few moments, we'll meet both of them and learn about the wealth of information and collections available at their institutions and how you can help your patrons access them during these pandemic times. First, I have a few other announcements to make. First, I'd like to thank my co-chair, Krishna Horrigan, who works with me to bring you these timely and relevant professional development programs on behalf of the Westchester Library Association. I'd also like to thank the Executive Board, President Giovanna Fiorini-Iannacci, Vice President Kim Stucco, Secretary Joanna Rooney, and Treasurer Allison Robbins, as well as the rest of the WLA board members whose hard work and support make these programs possible. After today's presentation, each participant will be sent a PDF of a continuing education certificate where you'll have a space to fill in your name and keep for your professional records. We'd also like to make sure you're aware of a few events we have coming up. On Thursday evening, January 28th, there will be a Meet and Unwind Zoom where you can join your colleagues from across the county for an informal Zoom meeting about what's going on with you in your library. Immediately following the Meet and Unwind on the 28th, WLA is co-sponsoring an exciting author event with Westchester Library System and Book Yaya, where Dulane Michel will have a conversation with best-selling, critically acclaimed author, editor of the New York Times Book Review, and host of the New York Times Book Review podcast, Pamela Paul. We're so excited to hear from Pamela, and we hope that you will all join us. And on the morning of February 3rd, we will also be hosting our midwinter conference virtually on Zoom. In addition to the business meeting that morning, there will also be a panel discussion on new technology and best practices in libraries and archive collections. Links to registration for each of these events will be in the chat momentarily here. And lastly, we'd like to bring to your attention WLA's annual Professional Development Awards. These are $500 reimbursable awards available to WLA members to pursue professional development opportunities like conferences and continuing education courses. So whether you're a clerk, a library assistant, a librarian, if you're a member of WLA, these are for you. For example, if you plan to attend the NYLA conference or participate in some kind of online training course, these awards can help cover the cost of associated fees. We're now accepting applications for these awards, and you can find a link to the applications as well as the instructions on the WLA website and in the chat in just a moment. The application deadline is April 16th, 2021, and recipients will be announced at our annual conference in May. As we get started here, we do request that you remain on mute for the duration of Jackie and Patrick's presentations. Patrick is going to present first and then turn things over to Jackie, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end. If you do happen to have a burning question during the presentation, please feel free to type it in the chat, and Krishna or I will bring it to Patrick and Jackie's attention. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and Jackie.
So good morning, everyone. Can everyone see the image of the White Plains Library on screen? Perfect. So my name is Pat Raftery, and I am the librarian here at the Westchester County Historical Society. And I'll start off by giving you a quick overview of our resources, what we have here at the Society, and then I will pass it on to Jackie. So one of our most frequently used, there we go. About a third or so of our patrons are genealogists, and we have a number of genealogical resources that can help them with their research. First off, we have family files, and these are simply folders for individual families. Some folders just have one piece of paper in them. Some take up an entire box. So the longer the family's been here, the more sort of prominent the family is in the county's history, the more material we have from them. And these family files have things like genealogies, correspondence, things like that. They're excellent resources for people who are looking for some of the families that have been here, particularly those who have been here since around the time of the Revolutionary War. We do have census records and census indexes. They used to get a lot of use before Ancestry.com became big. Nowadays, they don't get so much use, but we do have indexes to the federal censuses from 1790 to 1840 that were compiled by Elizabeth Fuller, who was our longtime librarian. And we also sell those. They can be purchased through our website. I'll talk a bit more about our publications in just a bit. We also have church records on microfilm as well as transcriptions of church records. And these are very useful because prior to 1881, New York State did not require the keeping of vital records. And so before 1881, generally speaking, the best bets are church records. So we have a number of them that have been microfilmed. There was a project in the 1990s that microfilmed many of the records of the Protestant churches in Westchester, as well as a number of transcriptions of these records. We don't really have much in terms of Roman Catholic Church records. For that, the records are held at the parish offices. One of our most frequently used resources is our cemetery transcription record collection. So around the time of World War I, a number of genealogists, I guess it was a thing at the time, they went around to the older burial grounds in Westchester and they simply copied down the information on the tombstones. And they eventually made their way to our library. And there is one master index for all of these records, all of these transcription records that were made. The best way I would describe the cemetery transcription record collection is if you had an ancestor who was buried in a cemetery in Westchester County that was founded before 1860 or so and had a tombstone, chances are that they're going to be mentioned in this cemetery transcription record collection. And again, if your ancestor died before 1881, there's maybe no death certificate for that ancestor. And so these tombstones actually serve as a kind of record themselves. And finally, we have family Bibles. These are family heirlooms where they would record vital records, births, marriages, deaths. And they eventually made their way to our library. And so we have a number of family Bibles for the older Westchester families. And again, they're a good genealogical resource because particularly before the keeping of vital records by the municipalities, where else would these events be recorded? So family Bibles are another good option. At the bottom, I have westchesterhistory.com/library. Westchesterhistory.com is our website and library is our section for the library. So a number of indexes are up there that I'll talk a bit more about them in just a bit as well, that you can access directly from our website. We're still working, it's an ongoing process to get these indexes digitized and available online. But that's the place to go to if you want to see what we have. We also have a number of periodicals that have to do with genealogy. Probably the most frequently used is the New York Genealogical and Biographical Record, which has been published since, I believe, the 1870s and is still published quarterly today. And we have a periodical index in our reading room. So we subscribe to all of the Historical Society newsletters in Westchester County, and we have a master index for their articles. I don't think there's any other place that has such an index. We're still working again on digitizing that, but that's an excellent resource for people who are looking for, let's say if there was an article about a particular family that was published in a local Historical Society newsletter, how else would you know it exists? You would know through this periodical index. And where else would you be able to access it? We have the copies of them because we subscribe to all these newsletters. We also have a biography index. The biography index is available through our website, and it indexes all of our biography vertical files. So the biography vertical files, some of them, they're newspaper clippings, things like that, on some famous Westchester County residents, but also some not so famous Westchester County residents. So we have thousands of obituaries for Westchester County residents that are in these biography vertical files and have been indexed through our biography index. We also have some transcriptions of early Westchester County wills, which are a good way of proving genealogical links. We don't actually have the wills themselves, but we do have these transcriptions, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit as well. And we also have scrapbooks and family photo albums. More and more we get contacted by people who are, let's say, cleaning out their late parents' homes. and they come across these scrapbooks and photo albums, and they're not particularly interested in genealogy, but they feel bad about throwing these albums out. And so they contact us and they donate them to our library. So we've had our collection of scrapbooks and photo albums has been growing lately. We also have, as you can imagine, plenty of local history resources. We have lots of books and pamphlets in our collection dealing with all different aspects of the county's history, histories of communities, histories of religious congregations, maybe histories of businesses, companies, and things like that. And as I mentioned before, we subscribe to all of the local historical society newsletters. We do have newspapers in both microfilm format and print format. Probably the most frequently used is the Eastern State Journal, which was based out of White Plains and was the official county newspaper. But oftentimes I find when I have folks who are looking for obituaries, our newspaper microfilm coverage doesn't really cover the whole county. And so a lot of times I will pass them on to the local public libraries because there's more newspaper coverage there in microfilm format. And we also have, and of course we published the Westchester Historian, which was formerly called the Quarterly Bulletin of the Westchester County Historical Society. It's been published since the mid-1920s, and the indexes, there are 2 indexes to the Historian that are accessible through our website. We have many maps and atlases in our collection, and just about all the atlases that we have been scanned and are available through the Westchester County Archives website, which I think Jackie might refer to in a bit. We also have manuscripts. Some of them are loose manuscripts, so let's say an original will, an original deed. Some of them are books. So for example, we have a number of books that are funeral home ledgers, which are also useful for both local historians and genealogists as well.
Patrick?
Yep.
Before you move on to the next slide, we do have a question in the chat. The question is the biography index ongoing and is it up to date?
The biography index is ongoing. So whenever anything is added to our biography vertical file, the entry is placed into the biography index. So that is ongoing. I think the one for 2020 will be uploaded to the website shortly, but it's always kept up to date. We also have some portions of collections of local historical societies. If you've ever been to our library and I've given you a tour of our vault, I'll show you particular collections that don't actually belong to us, but are with us on long-term loan. So for example, we have the entire collection of the Huguenot and New Rochelle Historical Association. We have just about the entire collection of the Mount Pleasant Historical Society. And so we have long-term loan arrangements with the societies, which enables researchers to come and use them and for the society to keep ownership of it. And on our website, we also have a store, which is westchesterhistory.com/store. We sell books that we publish, Picturing Our Past, which is a book that chronicles all the National Register sites in Westchester County. Westchester County, A Pictorial History, which is sort of our general history book that came out in 2018. The Guide to Genealogical Research for Westchester County, the Cemeteries of Westchester County. And we also sell secondhand books, used books that don't, for which we have several copies already in our library, can also be purchased through the store. So if you have anyone that comes up to the reference desk and is interested in purchasing books on Westchester history, feel free to send them to that link. We have an enormous image collection. We have over 150,000 images, photographs, engravings, glass plate negatives, regular negatives, postcards, slides, and transparencies. Our image database is westchester.pastperfectonline.com, which you can also access through our website. As of right now, we have about 70,000 image records in the Past Perfect database, and about 37,000 or so have scanned images attached. That's been a priority that we focused on over the past couple of years, getting our image collection scanned and available to the public. Most of our older images, I would say before about 1920 or so, have been scanned and can be searched through the database. We also have a number of special collections in our library, over 165 of them. And they include things like business records, genealogical collections of prominent Westchester families, like the Wood family of Mount Kisco in Bedford, the Mead collection of the Wakabuck up in Lewisboro. A number of local elected officials, including former state senator Susie Oppenheimer, state assemblywoman Sandra Galiff, have given us their records as well. So each of these special collections has a finding aid, and the finding aid can be found through westchester.pastperfectonline.com. We've always done offsite research for patrons who can't access our reading room, but as you can imagine, the requests for this have increased over the past 10 months or so. Reference questions can be submitted via email or phone, and the last slide in this presentation will be my email and phone number. We're not able to accommodate on-site researchers outside of reading room hours. Even when COVID was, before COVID, really don't have the staff to accommodate people outside the regular reading room hours. Jackie will chat a bit more about that in her presentation. We do research for patrons who want real research beyond just the typical reference question. The fee is $40 per hour. I often stress we're really only able to do research in our own collection. We don't have the ability to go to, let's say, the surrogate's office to get more recent wills, that sort of thing. If you have come across someone who's really interested in hiring someone to go around and do research, there are professional and certified genealogists who submit their information to a directory, and that's at apgen.org/directory. And you search by locality. If you search for Westchester County, you'll get the names of people who can do research for hire here in Westchester. So what do we not have here at the Historical Society? We do not have birth, marriage, and death certificates. For people who were born, married, or died in Westchester County, those certificates are held at the New York State Department of Health, as well as the office of the clerk of the municipality where the birth, marriage, or death took place. We don't have deeds in our collection. We do have some loose deeds, but we are not the repository for deeds in Westchester County. We do have some loose wills in our collection, but we're also not the repository for wills for Westchester County. We also don't have building records in our collection. I put the asterisk next to those three because, as I mentioned, there are exceptions. We do have the occasional loose deed, the occasional loose will. Building records, we do have some building records for major prominent historic sites in Westchester County. So we do have files for all of the sites in Westchester County that are on the National Register of Historic Places. So if someone is asking about, let's say, a prominent house, like if someone comes to you and is looking to do research on Lyndhurst, we have plenty of stuff on Lyndhurst, or for Thomas Paine's cottage in New Rochelle. But we don't have actual building records for, let's say, someone who's researching their 1900 house. What I like to say about that is if you're researching your house and you want to research the land on which it stands, you go to the county level. If you want to research the buildings that stand on the land, you go to the municipal level. So like the building department or the assessor's department. So if you're researching your property, you'll be probably going to two different places, both the county for land records and deeds, as well as the local municipality for building records. We also do not collect three-dimensional artifacts and objects. We used to have a three-dimensional artifact and object collection. The problem is, if you've been to our facility here in Elmsford, we don't have any exhibit space for it. So we deaccessioned the material in the mid-90s, and we were able to get the particular items to local historical societies. So for example, we had spinning wheels that were connected to Ossining, and so now those spinning wheels are at the Ossining Historical Society. And last but not least, we don't have professional genealogists on staff. So I personally am not a certified genealogist. And whenever someone is looking for someone who really wants, and someone who can help them go really in depth on their family history research, I usually suggest that they go to that link that I showed before, which is apgen.org/directory. And so here's my final slide. That's my email address, which is pat@westchesterhistory.com. If you want to email me through that, or if you want to pass it along to any of your patrons, please feel free. You can also go to westchesterhistory.com and you'll find there's a contact form there. And if you fill that contact form out, the information goes directly to me, so I'll see it that way too. And we have one line for our offices. It is 914-592-4323. And so that brings my end of the presentation to a close.
Thank you, Patrick. So we'll ask you to stop sharing your screen so Jackie can pull her presentation up. And just make sure you unmute yourself too, Jackie.
All right, there we go. Okay. All right, are we set? Can everybody see my screen? Okay, good. So, hi, welcome everyone. Thanks for your interest in the Westchester County Archives. I'm Jackie Graziano, the head archivist at the Archives, and I want to quickly thank Megan and Krishna and the Westchester Library Association for hosting this and giving us a chance to talk about our collections. I'm excited to do that because I think it's important for you all to know how we can be a resource for the Westchester librarians and the library patrons. And of course, the rest of you who have been in contact with us or are interested in learning more about us. What I'm going to talk about is what is the Westchester County Archives, give you an overview of our collections, tell you how our collections are used, how to access them, give you some time for questions, and some contact information. I've actually provided a sheet to Megan who can provide that to you so that you don't have to try scribbling it all down from the contact slide. So what is the Westchester County Archives? We are the repository for historic Westchester County government records. Often you will find, if you're doing genealogy, that a lot of the records that you will use were created by some government office, and that is a function of government, particularly, especially, of course, county government. The functions that we provide are documented, by records. That's how you know what happened, when it happened, who was involved in it. So it's an important function of government, and the records that are considered to have historic value are the ones that we hold. Not all are considered to have historic value, but many, such as wills and deeds that Patrick talked about, do have permanent value and are kept, and we hold them here at our facility. The Archives was created in 1985 by Andrew Spano, who was then the county clerk. He noticed there were a lot of old record books sitting around on the shelves in the county clerk's office, and because he'd been a history teacher, he felt that they should have proper storage and be available for research. So he set in motion the events that created the Archives. We are a research and storage facility. We have closed stacks, which means that the public does not have access to them. If you come in to use the reading room for research, you'll fill out call slips, and the staff or volunteers who are trained to help in the reading room will retrieve items for you and bring them out to you. Our materials are used in-house only. They're unique items in many cases, so it's for their security and preservation. We don't lend items or lend them out in interlibrary loan. We don't check out items. As I mentioned, we have professional staff of archivists on hand and trained volunteers who are available here to help with research. So we're a resource for county employees as well as the general public, not just people in Westchester, because there are many people who lived in Westchester who no longer live in Westchester, ancestors who lived here, families no longer live here. So we're generally available to, I've gotten requests from Japan and Sweden and also all over. We provide free access to the reading room, your tax dollars at work. Of course, now because of COVID, it's somewhat restricted and by appointment, but I'll talk a little bit about how to do that. coming up. We do charge for research if you can't come in, and we do have a small copy fee. With the Westchester County Historical Society, we provide centralized access to the county's historic records. And what's the difference between us and the Historical Society? Again, we're the government archive. Our focus is government records. Historical Society, as you saw, is broad, general Westchester history. So the bulk of our collection is on paper records. They are loose in folders or document boxes. Many are bound in books. We also have photos and maps from several county departments. Our records date back to 1684, and they go all the way up to the present. We have over 8,000 cubic feet of records. Cubic foot is about document box, about this size. Over 75,000 maps and more than 10,000 photographs. And I would say maybe about half of our photographs have been scanned and are available on our digital site. Everything is housed in temperature and humidity controlled vaults, which extends the life of the paper, the photograph, keep them accessible and safe for generations to come. So the documents tell the story of not only Westchester County government, the 3 branches of government. We have records from the County Executive's Office, the Board of Legislators, and the county courts, many county departments, the County Clerk's Office, the Parks Department, Public Works, Public Safety, the Health Department, District Attorney's Office. But we also contain the records of the people, warts and all. Some of my favorite quirkier record groups are the bastardy proceedings, which date from around 1800. The horseshoers registry, which I love that we have a horseshoers registry. As you can see, they're not really used much anymore. And the almshouse is an important one if you're doing genealogy, because it was sort of the precursor to the social services department. That was where people went if they were destitute or chronically ill. There was no better provision for them at that time. Those records, as you see, date from 1875 to 1908. Those are pretty full intake records. So if you have someone, an ancestor who you can't locate other places, it's worth checking the almshouse records. Here's a little example from our photographic collection of intergovernmental cooperation. That's former County Executive Andrew O'Rourke and former New York State Governor Mario Cuomo. Notice that they're evenly balanced on that seesaw, showing, you know, governmental cooperation and equality of purpose. And West Help was an affordable housing complex in Greenburgh. Overview of our collections. I will go over the most used records. I would say about a third. These represent about a third of our collection, but they are the ones that are used the most, and again, primarily for genealogy. County Clerk performs the functions of citizenship records. So we have these naturalization records. They're also known as from about the 1840s up to 1992. We do have some copies of marriage records. It's a little bit of an anomaly because, as Patrick mentioned, those are a function. Marriage licenses are issued by local municipalities. The clerks in local municipalities, the cities and the towns handle that. But during the period of 1908 to 1935, the county was also getting copies. So we do have some that are centrally located with us. Deeds, of course, the property records, you know, an important function of the county clerk's office, and one of the oldest functions. The county clerk's office was created in 1683, and the earliest record that we have dates from March of 1684. And of course, deeds go all the way up to the present because people are still buying property. These have all been digitized, and they are available in a database that the county clerk's office created. It's a for-fee access database, but we provide free access to it in our reading room. We also have many, many maps. The earliest ones, although we don't have maps that go back as far as the Historical Society's collection. Our earliest maps date from about the 1830s, but they show some interesting features. Some of the earliest ones we have are surveyor's drawings of what is now the Hudson River line from Metro North. It was originally the New York and Central Hudson River Railroad, I think. And what it shows is whose property was taken to create the railroad, and Washington Irving in Irvington was among one of those people. Here's just an example of a naturalization record. This is a declaration of intention. It was known as first papers. When people intended to start the process, they would file this. Of course, the look of them has changed over the years, but this one was interesting, I thought, because it shows how the clerk wrote the man's name out, and then his signature is underneath the word Russia. That's his actual signature in Hebrew, the name Abraham. So you'll often see that there are spelling discrepancies between how the person wrote their own name and how the clerk wrote it, and that creates some interest when you're searching these records. We can help you with that if you have questions. It's taking a little while to load. Just an example of one of our earlier maps. Some of them are really beautiful, hand-drawn and hand-colored. This is Elizabeth Delancey's farm in North Salem from 1865. So continuing the overview of the most used records, again, the wills and estate files, probate records, which are filed with what's known as the Surrogates Court in New York. You'll notice, I think Patrick mentioned this, the records don't start until after the Revolutionary War, because earlier they were filed with New York County, which is Manhattan, and those records are with the Surrogates Court in Manhattan. But we do have some books of abstracts that we can access. And they only go up to a certain date, because even though they have permanent value, this is where, you know, what we would love to have versus what we can practically do. We just don't have the space, because after those dates, the volume of records just expands so greatly, and they tend to be less fragile. So we figure they're in good enough storage where they are now and don't need to come into our humidity and temperature controlled vaults yet. Someday I hope we'll expand and have more space. We also have complete court cases from the Supreme Court. It's not the federal Supreme Court, it's the state Supreme Court, which has a presence in each county, and county court records from 1847 up to 1911. And again, why don't we have them later? It's a space issue, excuse me. Parks Department records are also used a lot because Playland and the Bronx River Parkway were publicly built, publicly funded projects in the 1920s, when there was a lot of building going on in Westchester, and which impacted how Westchester functions and looks today. Why are all these roads parallel to rivers? Why do they flood? Why are they so twisty and windy? It's because of why they were built and when they were built and what their original function was. They were supposed to be for pleasure driving. County parks and roads also get studied a lot. Public land use is of interest to a lot of researchers. Incorporation records might be of use to genealogists, not just because they document the beginnings of churches, but because they contain records from associations such as fraternal organizations and clubs that your ancestors may have been part of. Some of our treasures include Library of Deeds, which is our oldest record book, dates from 1684. We have an early printed copy of the Declaration of Independence that was printed on July 9th, 1776. And for example, John D. Rockefeller's will. Why is it with us and not the Rockefeller Archives up in Pecanico? Because it's a government record. The original that was filed for probate is on file was with the Surrogates Court and now with us. I'm sure the Rockefeller Archives has copies too. For those who are interested, what do we have on the Westchester Library Association? In the Carl Pforzheimer papers, Carl Pforzheimer was the first chairman of the county planning department. He was kind of a visionary. He set up a lot of the functions that the county planning department, such as keeping track of population statistics, demographics, income, information, land use, and so on, that the planning department still functions today. And he also oversaw the studies and correspondence that resulted in the creation of a county-wide library system. So here's a shot of our oldest record. It's the will of Philip Galpin from Rye. It's the oldest official record of Westchester. It's from March 1684. And you notice a couple of things about this, you know, beautiful curlicue handwriting, a little difficult to read, but it's in English because by 1684, Westchester was a British colony, not a Dutch colony anymore. How our collections are used primarily for genealogy still. People come in to do research or call us for research, but I am also available to do presentations on how to use original records or records for genealogy if you want to contact me about that. There was a question about census records that was submitted, and I think Patrick talked about that they have the federal census on microfilm. We have the New York State census records on microfilm from 1905, 1915, and 1925, but I believe they're also available online through Family Search, and I think that's free, just have to set up an account with them. But if you want to go, you know, page by page microfilm, we're the ones to contact with that. A lot of people use our facility also for property research, our collections. As Patrick mentioned, we also don't have much on houses. We have plans from county buildings like the county center, but we don't have information plans for individual houses. But of course, we can help you research the property and find out who lived there before, or if you're interested in getting a building on a national registry or a historic registry, we can help you do the research. And of course, there's lots of mundane questions about easements and boundaries that we can help with by providing copies of deeds. Dual citizenship has become a really big thing, and I answer a lot of questions about that. For those, you need copies of naturalization records. And I notice as people have not been able to travel so much this year, they're preparing for future travels, I think, by getting their dual citizenship set up. And as I mentioned, public land use, the parks and the roadways get a lot of study. So how to access us? We do have a website. It's on that information sheet that I provided to Megan. Please explore our website. There's a lot of good information on it. The guide to collections is on there, our listings of series, finding aids, and box and folder lists so that you'll know what years we have certain records from, what they cover, how they're organized. The indexes to our most used records, such as the surrogates, the wills and estate files, the marriage records, are on our website, alphabetical by last name. And we do have a genealogy resources page on our website as well. The digital website, again, there's the address. It's all our digitized collections, which includes atlases, several older county atlases, many maps from the county clerk's collection. About half of our photos are digitized and cataloged and searchable in reports from like the Parks Department, and county executive speeches are up there. Also, the Veterans Cemetery Index Cards, which is an interesting collection. It was a WPA project created in the 1930s to locate and document burial sites of veterans. And that dates back prior to the Revolutionary War and covers up through World War I, again, because it was created in the 1930s. So how to access us? Of course, I'm here Monday through Friday. You can contact me by email or phone. You can access the reading room. Again, right now it's by appointment, only open on Wednesdays for 2-hour sessions. But I will contact you ahead of time to talk with you about your research beforehand so we can maximize your time. You can book an appointment on our website homepage. There's a link there. We do charge a fee for copies and for research requests, but contact me first because I can help you focus your research and how to approach it. If you come in and take your own photographs of items, which you're welcome to do, there's no fee for that. We are on social media, Facebook and Twitter, but I was doing that a lot during the shutdown. And then when requests started picking up, I've kind of not had really time to do that, but I'm hoping to get back to it because it's a great tool for us. So if there's any questions, and then I'm going to put up my contact information.
Okay, I think at this point we can open it up to questions to both Jackie and Patrick, or both of them, if anybody has one that they'd like to ask.
If you're shy about asking now, please feel free to contact me. Shoot me an email or call.
Yep.
I am also the archives reference desk. So if you send an email there through our website, it will come to me. I know I covered a lot in a short time.
And if anyone's on phone, I think it's *6 to unmute yourself.
Anyone?
No? Okay, well.
I'll just say this.
I'm Daniel Fred.
I'm Mount Vernon. I'm trustee at the Historical Society, and I was an intern at the archives with Jackie. So
Hi, Daniel.
Patrick and Jackie, they do a tremendous job. And if you have a patron who needs help and you can't give them help, because I've done that myself, I've sent them over to refer them to them. So, and they're always willing to help. So I just want to say that. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
That's a nice endorsement. I've sent some people your way too.
Yes, they've sent people my way, questions my way too. So.
Because you have a really great collection over there at Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm the person who submitted the question about property research. I just am curious about the history of the land where my house is, but I'm a little confused now as to where I would go first to find out who is, it happens to be in New Rochelle, but 100 years ago, who lived here in going further back? Just could you, between the two of you, I'm confused as to which would be the first place I would look besides going to the county and looking at deeds.
I think you can, for that, you could go to both of us. In our collection, we have a number of city directories. We also have the census, things like that. So if you were interested in learning about the people who resided in your house, we could probably provide you more help on that end. I think if you were looking to actually trace the ownership back, I think Jackie would be able to help you more on that end. Would that be right, Jackie?
Yeah, and I would say if you can access our digital website, that's a good place to start, because looking at the atlases, the old atlases, we have 1929. I usually, when someone comes in to do property research, I start them with the most recent atlas because it's the most recognizable for what the place looks like now. And then we go back to the earlier ones to see what it looked like in the era at the time period that you're interested in, and see if we can get a name for an earlier owner, and then we'll hop on the deeds index and start researching deeds. And if you're looking, as Patrick mentioned, to fill in some blanks in between that, it's the local building department would have, or the tax assessor's office would have information about property value and improvements that were done, expansions to the buildings, or if any new buildings were constructed, or something was knocked down and rebuilt. That actually wouldn't be with the county, because the deeds sometimes detail that kind of information, but very often they don't. They just generally will provide the boundary information, any special stipulations in the land transfer from one person to another. So filling in the blanks, sometimes you also need to go to the local office. But we are happy to give you a start. And a good place, like I said, is if you want to start on your own, you can start through the digital website. Looking at the atlases is really helpful to get a visual.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there is another question in the chat here. How often do you receive new material?
I'll let you answer that first, Patrick.
Okay.
You get more than we do.
To give you an example of how much material we receive, new material we receive, we were established in 1874. We've had library space since the 1920s, so we're coming up on 100 years of having a library. I would say about 70 to 75% of the material that we have has come in the past 25 years. So we have been receiving lots and lots of those special collections I've mentioned, the 165 plus with the finding aids that you can access through our database. We have received a number of those over the past 25 years or so. And we add probably half a dozen or so each year. A lot of times their families, let's say they had a particular family member who was the genealogist. And when that person passed away, maybe their son or daughter decided they wanted to pass it along to someplace else. they will bring it to us. You may have a local organization like a benevolent society that has decided that it can no longer continue in existence. They will contact us and give us their papers. So we're constantly getting new material, particularly in terms of those big special collections.
So for the archives, it's a different situation. We're essentially a closed collection because we are only a repository for county government records. So anything we get comes from a county government department. The bulk of our collection are records from 1911 and earlier per a state law, because there was a fire at the New York State Library in 1911 that destroyed a lot of the state copies of records such as census records or deeds or anything that copies had been sent to the state. So the state passed a law saying the counties must keep their copies of all these records from this date earlier forever, permanently. And so that was part of the reason that the archives was created, was to house those records. And then we received records more recent, such as the wills and the deed books, because again, they're considered to have historic value. So when records from different county departments come up to the end of their useful life, what's known as the records retention schedule that the state establishes or the federal government establishes, records have to be kept for a year, 10 years, 20 years, or permanently. When certain records come up to the end of their, active life, we review them, see, okay, which ones do we think have historic value, will be of interest to future generations. We'll take those in, but it's very small compared to the bulk of what we have now. And we don't take donations from the outside because, again, our focus is county government records.
Thank you. So there's another question in the chat. What is the difference between census records and a census index?
So the census records, I guess best way I'd answer that is the census records that we have are mostly on microfilm. Some have been transcribed. So there might have been, let's say, a random census done of a colonial town, and we have the transcription of that. They're not indexed or arranged in any order that would be easy for researchers to access. So before they go to the actual census record itself, it's best for them to access the census indexes that we have produced. So for example, the census indexes that Elizabeth Fuller produced for us, it's an alphabetical index of the census, regardless of towns. So you would open up, let's say we're looking for Joseph Smith, you'd open up the census index and you'd look for Joseph Smith, and it would say, let's say Joseph Smith, Newcastle, if they lived in Chappaqua. So then you would go from that to the actual census record itself to find the entry and to find more about Joseph Smith's household. I would say the difference is the census records were usually produced by some sort of government agency. Say the federal government produced the federal census, the state government produced the state census. The census indexes are records that either we have produced or that a researcher, genealogist, or librarian has produced to make it easier for researchers to access and make use of the census records.
Yeah, the office that creates the census doesn't produce an index. They just use them to generate lots of demographic reports, but they don't produce an index. So that's basically left up to, I guess, the local areas and intrepid people like Elizabeth to create the indexes that help people.
Great. So there's another one in the chat here, and I think we'll have time for one more question after this one, if anybody still has one. Are there specific records for county and judicial appointments? For example, a tax collector or a judge?
We do have some oaths of offices and other sorts of records that cover county appointments. I think they're also mentioned in the Board of Legislators records. So if you're interested in those, you can certainly look on our website to see what we have in the Guide to Collections. But you can also contact me about that. Off the top of my head, I'm not as familiar with those because they don't get used as much. But yes, there is some sort of record of when people were appointed and how long they filled those offices. There's also for top officials, there's a desk reference to several county departments. I believe there's a link to it on our website, and we do try to remember to keep that updated.
So if you come in to do research, what are the question is, what are the rules? So maybe what are the guidelines right now for coming into the reading room with COVID?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I should have covered that, but thanks. That's a great question. Actually, all the questions were. Thank you all for them, but this one particularly I should have covered. So yes, you'll make the appointment through the website, through our website. The link is on the home page. We allow 2 people in per session. It's a 2-hour session. You'll come in. It's each person has to sign up separately. So please don't bring a friend or a family member along unless you sign them up as well. You know, if you're both coming in, then you both need to sign up. We really need to, you know, we created a plan that was approved by the county for how we were going to allow access to the building, and per, you know, state directives, we have to keep the numbers low. So for right now, unfortunately, you can't just bring a friend along. Once you come in, you'll fill out a registration form, and like I said, I will contact you ahead of time to find out what your research is, or you can shoot me an email ahead of time and tell me what you're researching. Please look at the guide to collections and the indexes, and let me know if there's anything in particular that you want to see, because I'll pull it and have it ready for you, so you don't have to sit around, you know, using part of your 2 hours of research waiting for me to pull stuff. I try to have things ready for you so that we can hit the ground running and maximize your time. And again, you can bring in a camera to take your own pictures. You are allowed also to bring in a laptop, tablet. We only use pencils, and we do provide scrap paper if you need scrap paper. And of course, you know, I'm available for consultation and guidance if you have questions along the way.
And Jackie and I think we've coordinated pretty well. If we have a particular patron who's interested in accessing both of our collections,
yes,
that we go through our indexes and whatnot to make sure that everything that we think that they could use is pulled for them and ready, so they don't have to wait for us to go in the back and pull stuff from the stacks.
Yeah, both collections are accessible. The Historical Society's indexes and their card catalog are in the reading room, available for use. So we try to make it as easy as possible for everyone, but they also do have the online index as well.
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Patrick and Jackie. This was great. Before everybody takes off, I'm going to put another link in the chat. And this is just a little program feedback form. If you could take a few minutes and fill that out for us, that would be wonderful. I'll also send that out in the CEU email, and I'll also send Jackie's resource list out in that email. Unfortunately, it's not letting me put it in the chat, so I'll make sure you all get it that way as well. And as Krishna said, this recording will be available on WLA's website in the next week or 2. So you should be able to refer back to it that way as well. And everybody have one.
Thanks for your time.
Yes, thank you so much, both of you. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thanks.